Hey everyone, and welcome to another Sasquatch Theory podcast. On this episode, we have Jonathan, and he had a Bigfoot sighting in Wisconsin. Jonathan and his family rented an Airbnb cabin at a remote lake. Jonathan was out on the property one day, walking a trail, when he encountered a Sasquatch creature. He got a really good look at the creature, and he knows without a doubt that this was not a black bear. I am actually quite surprised I have not received more Bigfoot reports from Wisconsin, so if you have seen a Bigfoot creature in Wisconsin, feel free to get in touch with me someday. If you guys can, please like the podcast, subscribe to the channel, and if you have had a Bigfoot or cryptid encounter before, please get in touch with me. Alright guys, let's dive into Jonathan's Bigfoot encounter from the state of Wisconsin. All right, Jonathan, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you so much for asking. Jonathan, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And if you would, tell me a little bit about yourself, kind of where you're from, and your Bigfoot encounter from the very beginning, please.
All right. My name's Jonathan. I'm from Colorado. Every summer, me and my family go up to Wisconsin and visit some family in the woods. They're in the northern part, but we usually travel a little bit down south near like central northern Wisconsin, kind of in the Hayward area, and we always VRBO a cabin. And about, I would say 11 or 12 years ago, maybe around 2012, 2013. Um, that's when I had my encounter when we were renting out a cabin. I'll try to describe the cabin. The cabin is an important scene, I think, because it's kind of interesting. So it's pretty remote. There's maybe one cabin half a mile down the road, and it was, I would say, 100 yards off of a lake. I don't remember which lake since it was so long ago, but this cabin had two levels. The main level kind of has an area that connects to the upper area, and then there's a basement section that's finished too. And since the cabin's built on a hill, that lower section also is flush with the lower level of the hill. Um, in that lower basement that's finished, there's a sliding glass door, and I would say about 20 to 30 yards out, there's a deer feeder. And the owner of the house really likes to watch deer eat and watch them graze. He has a few campfires out there too, maybe 30 yards out for his guests. And then there's a little like dirt path that's 100 yards to the lake, and on that lake there's a dock, so that if you have a boat, if you want to go fishing, you can go fishing on it. And the neighbors, they have a pontoon boat with a cover on it. Um, Going to that day more specifically, um, we were there for maybe 2 or 3 days beforehand, and I woke up late. And when we were at the cabin, it was me, my two sisters, my parents, and my grandparents. And when I woke up, no one was in the house. So I thought, A, someone either went fishing or they all left to go shopping without me. So I checked the garage. One of the cars was gone. So I was like, okay, someone must have left. But then I was like, oh, maybe someone else went fishing. So I wanted to go down to the dock and check to see if my grandpa's boat was still there. So I go down the trail and I open up the sliding glass door. Um, I leave it open because I knew I was going to be right back. And so I walked down there, and I would say 75% way down near the water, I get this feeling that I'm being watched. And my dad growing up, he's from that area, and he got lost in the woods a few times, and he always told me, if you ever feel like you're being watched, listen to your gut. It's most of the time true. Don't psych yourself out. Listen to it. So I was I was 10 at the time, so I'm freaking out a little bit. And so when I'm thinking on my feet, I see this pontoon boat of my neighbors, and my grandpa's boat is still there. So they never went fishing, But in a rush, I get onto the neighbor's pontoon boat because they have a cover on it, and that cover has maybe an inch gap between the boat and the cover, so I can see out just fine because I have that inch, but nothing can see me inside the pontoon boat, and that feeling's still there. And so I'm looking, I'm like, what the hell? Why am I getting this feeling? And so I look and I look for 20 minutes. I'm like, there's no bears in this area. There's no wolves. Why am I getting so worked up? And so I was like, I'm psyching myself out. I'm just afraid because I'm all alone out here. And so I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna book it back up to the house. It's 100 yards. I'm gonna lock that door behind me and just let it be it. And so I get out of the pontoon boat and I start running up this hill up to the cabin. And I would say as soon as I'm 50, maybe 40 yards out of the house, this creature, I'd say it was 7.5 to 8.5 feet tall, pure black, and just walks in front of me. And it was halfway in between the house and me. So I'd say it was probably, I don't know, 15 yards away from me and another 15 to the house. Um, it was really scary. And the best way to describe how I reacted to it was just deer in headlights. Just super, super scared, froze. I don't even remember what it sounded like, what it smelled like. All my senses just went dull on me. I remember what it looked like, but I think when you get that scared and that close to something that's so much more powerful than you, and you really feel that dread, you really lose it. And I just froze. And we made eye contact. It definitely saw me, and I still don't understand if it was a bear, um, why it didn't attack me, and if it was a Bigfoot, which I think it was, um, why it didn't come after me, why it didn't attack me, why it didn't show hostility towards me, um, and it just walked away. And the interesting thing was, even though it was walking, it was so quick and it was so fast, and it walked from the left to the right, so from the campfire area to the deer feeder area. And I would say within 5 seconds I lost it in the bush. And in that surrounding area by the camp, if anyone's ever been in the Hayward or a little bit north of Hayward, you know how dense that forest is. And I just lost it, and I ran inside, locked all the doors, and hid underneath the bed. And it was probably one of the scariest days of my life. Um, I mean, the creature, try to go into a little bit more detail about the creature. It was pure black hair. I think the best way to describe the face was it had super, super black skin, and the hair was super, super black and very coarse, kind of like, I don't want to say pig hair, but kind of like bear hair too, but not as frizzy. Um, the nose was very pushed in and wide, and it didn't really, I don't know if you would call it like a crest on the nose or the ridge on the nose. It didn't really have a crest. It was just very smushed in, very, very wide. And then the lips were really very, very thin, very thin. Um, the eyes were super black. There was hair everywhere except kind of on the forehead area, the cheek area, lips. Um, it didn't really have any white on the eyes, which I thought was really interesting. It was just black, brown, dark brown irises. Um, the other thing that I did notice about it too is it almost looked like it didn't have a neck. I mean, its neck was just non-existent almost, and the back muscles were just gigantic, and it was so broad, and you could just see the individual muscle fibers move, and it was really interesting, and you could really tell how powerful the creature was. Um, when it was walking by me, I mean, I I don't want to sound cliche, but it did just do the classic Bigfoot walk that you see on bumper stickers, on water bottles. It had the classic walk. Um, I think there's some other smaller details too that I thought was interesting too. So we would watch, it was during the time that the Blackhawks were in the Stanley Cup final. Um, and me and my grandpa were watching it downstairs. And when we were watching the Stanley Cup final, there were little tiny rocks that would hit that glass. It was never enough to shatter the glass, but always enough to just piss off my grandpa. And he would always think it was teens hitting the glass. And looking back on it now, I wonder if it was the Sasquatch trying to just, I don't know, like lure us out or just to get us annoyed. Um, I don't know what it was, but I think it was the Sasquatch trying to get us out of our house or something. And then another big detail is the VRBO owner or the person that we were renting from, he was letting us know when we first came there. He's like, "Hey, can you keep an eye out for poachers in the area? A lot of my deer have been missing, and a lot of my deer population has gone down in our area. So if you could watch the feeder for me, I'd greatly appreciate it." And this feeder always had corn in it. The owner came by once while we were there, and we were there for a week to fill up the corn. And he tried to talk to us about if he saw anyone, and I said I didn't. I was afraid to tell him what I saw. Um, Other than that, that's about it with my encounter.
Okay, I appreciate you, Jonathan, for sharing that with me. And this creature, before you encountered it, did you get a bad feeling?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, definitely that dread, being watched. Just the hairs on the back of your arms and neck were just standing up. I've never gotten that feeling today. I go hunting and fishing all the time, and I still haven't gotten that feeling before. Um, I knew something was watching me, but I didn't know what it was.
Yeah, and I know that feeling all too well. So at this point, you're heading back towards the cabin, correct?
Yes.
And did the creature follow you, or did you happen to see it as you were heading to the cabin?
As I was running to the cabin, it crossed my path as I was running across that dirt path from left to right. So the dirt path is going straight into the house perpendicularly, and then the creature is running parallel to the cabin, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and do you think this creature was trying to cut you off, or possibly just trying to avoid being seen by you?
Uh, that's a good question. Um, I feel like if it was trying to cut me off, it definitely worked because I stopped dead in my tracks when I saw it, and I froze. So it could have intercepted me, but if it was going to try to intercept me, I feel like these creatures are smart enough to do that for a reason. And he or she just kept on walking, and so maybe it was just trying to avoid me or to get a better angle of the pontoon boat. I don't know if it saw me leave the boat, but that I don't know.
Yeah, there's a few things here that I'm seeing, and one is there's the lake, which Sasquatch are found near water, and there's a deer feeder, which that's food for the squatch, and also the deer that the feeder brings in, that's more food. And there's also this dirt path that goes to the lake, and I often hear that Sasquatch will use trails. So there could be a few reasons why the creature was around. I mean, you got food, water cover, and a path of least resistance, and they like to watch people as entertainment, so it could have been watching you the whole time.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Those are good points.
Yeah, and the owner, he mentioned that deer were missing. Is that correct? They kind of just disappeared.
Yeah, he said that there used to be, I don't know, 6 or 7 regular deer that stopped by daily, and then when we were there, I could only count maybe two that I saw the whole time.
Yeah. That is interesting. Was this creature on all fours or was it upright?
It was upright. It had probably 7 foot strides. These strides were huge. Um, it was covering ground quickly, even though it wasn't running, just by how long the strides were. The arms were swaying on its side. I mean, it was just the classic Bigfoot. Is it the Giblin or
The Patterson Gimlin footage?
film?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly the exact same way it was walking.
Okay, so it was kind of hunched over. It had that arm swing. Did it look over at
Yes.
you a few times?
It looked over at me as we crossed paths, and then I hate to be a bad witness when it came so close to me, but it freaked me out. I didn't want to look if it was following me. As soon as it went away and started going in the opposite direction, I booked it inside. I was so afraid. I locked the door. So it only looked at me once, but we did make eye contact.
Yeah, and you're for sure this wasn't a black bear, correct?
I'm 100% sure. I mean, the nose was so much different than a black bear. I think the lips were different. If it was a black bear to me as a hunter, I don't see why it wouldn't have attacked me. I mean, that black bear was probably 2 or 3 strides away from me. I'm an easy meal up there. I mean, yeah, it's berry season. When we went up, blueberries were in season, so maybe it was already full. But no black bear gets to be 7, 8 feet tall. We're talking grizzly bear size at that point.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds like that was a Bigfoot creature. And whenever you described the nose, I remember you saying that it was like conical shape. Did it have a snout?
It did not have a snout. The face was fairly flat. Um, it was really flat. The hair was covering so much of it that it was kind of hard to make out any specific details in terms of cheekbones or any terms of like I don't know, but it had a big brow. The eyes were dark brown, almost black irises, and it had no nose ridge. It just had the flares out.
Yeah, that sounds like Sasquatch. And I know there's going to be people in the comments that say that was a dog man, but it sounds like that was a Bigfoot. And this happened roughly, I don't know, let's say like 11 years ago. Is that correct? You said in 2013?
Yeah, it was when I was probably 10, and that's something I forgot to mention was I was so young at this point. Is I feel like it's interesting that a Sasquatch or whatever it was would reveal itself to me when I was that young.
Yeah, that could be another reason. You're young, you're a kid, and this creature is not intimidated by you. And typically, they'll stay away from adults.
Hmm, interesting.
Yeah, and whenever you were having the rocks thrown at the window, the pebbles, how old were you then? Was this around the same time frame?
Yeah, this was probably the day prior and the day after. We never returned back to this cabin. We always try to move around in Wisconsin to just fish different lakes and visit with our family. Um, so it was around the exact same time.
Yeah, and why do you think the creatures, these beings, why do you think they were trying to get your attention? Were they just gauging your reaction, you think?
I don't know. I think what he or she could have thought too is maybe as I was running up, I was probably the same size as a deer or maybe a little bit smaller as a deer. And maybe I was running right past the deer feeder. Maybe he thought I was some sort of deer going in. And then as soon as it got close enough to me and noticed that, hey, this isn't food, this is a human, I should walk away. I think maybe that's why.
Yeah, it could be. Maybe it thought you were a deer heading to the deer feeder and it was going to cut you off and realize you were a person and then took off.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. And this creature was a black color, and you mentioned that it had hair kind of like a black bear. That's very similar to the Sasquatch that I seen here in Missouri. They were like a jet black color, and the best way I can describe the fur on the creature was like a little black bear cub, like how jet black it is, how shiny it is. And
Yeah.
what do you remember the
Yep.
most about this creature?
Ooh. Um, I think just how much taller and how much bigger it was than me. I My dad's 6'8", and he's a really big dude, and I always felt like he was the biggest man in the room growing up, and I always felt safe. And this creature would have just towered over my dad, and I remember it just looking down at me, and I was like, "This is it. I'm done." So I feel like I didn't really. I've watched a few of your other videos, and everyone talks about smell or hearing footsteps, and I think that's the other interesting thing is I don't remember hearing a single thing. It was so silent. Like even though it walked in front of me, I didn't hear a footstep. I don't know if that was just me being scared to death, but it was completely silent.
Yeah, that's what they do. The jet black Sasquatch that I seen here on my property, it got up and walked off just like the Patterson Gimlin footage, and it looked over at me a few times. But what I really remember is it was walking in the oak trees, or not in the oak trees, but where the oaks grow, and there's a bunch of oak leaves everywhere, and it was silent. Like it never really made a sound, even
Hmm.
whenever it was walking off.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was never. I mean, deer make sounds. They're quiet, but they make sounds. You can hear things, but I never heard it coming.
yeah. That's frightening for sure. And how tall do you estimate the creature to be, and how much do you think it weighed?
I would say, whew, I would say 8 feet tall and anywhere from 7 to 800 pounds. I mean, this thing was pure muscle. It had no fat on it. Um, 800 pounds might even be an understatement. It's hard to tell with, there's not a lot of scientific research on these creatures, so it's hard to tell an accurate guess to it, but I'd say 800 pounds.
Yeah, that sounds pretty accurate. So this was an older creature. It wasn't like a juvenile. It was an adult.
Yeah. And the re it had a very human-like face, and that's the reason why I don't think it was a bear. And I feel like even with Sasquatch, I'd like your opinion on it. I bet their faces mature like human faces do. They lose the baby fat, and this Sasquatch definitely had a more grown-up-esque um, face to it, more of like how it held itself, more serious. I've heard accounts of juveniles playing and kind of toying around, and this Sasquatch just seemed pure business. No expression on its face. Absolutely no expression.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen a juvenile before too, and they just have like, I don't know, like baby features to them, kind of like how a fawn has like a little bottle nose, and they're like,
Hmm.
like how infants are tubby almost, like that's how the juveniles are, at least the one that I encountered. But like the adults, they're a lot older looking. And Fred Roll from Subarctic Alaska said it the best. Like they have like a really wrinkly face. Not all of them, but the one that I encountered, kind of like a Native
Hmm.
American. If you ever look at those old Native American photos of the Indians, like how wrinkly and leathered their faces are. Like that's how the
Yeah,
older Sasquatch are.
yeah. I really like your usage of leathery. Um, that's a great way to put the skin is leathery and very textured. Very not smooth like human skin, but a little bit more worn and beat down and weathered like leather.
Yeah. And have you ever returned to the cabin after this encounter?
I haven't. My we had family up there, and a few of them passed away recently, and we really haven't had a reason to go back up there. And quite frankly, I would be afraid to go in those woods again. I hear people going back and trying to re-encounter or see him again. And I'm like, you guys have so much courage and bravery that I could not have. I'm deathly afraid of whatever I saw. It'd be hard for me to go back out there alone.
Yeah. It freaks you out for a long time, and the more you think about it, it makes
Yeah.
you want to look for answers. So that's where I started off. Like after I encountered them, I'd go out there during the day, but nighttime, I'd just stay in the yard and just listen. And then eventually I started going out there, and then I started camping at night. And then I don't know, the feeling never goes away, but you get eager to learn more about these things. But yeah, most people they won't go back out there. I'm not saying that I'm brave. Maybe I'm stupid for going out there knowing what's truly out in the woods, but I just want to get these things on film or just have another encounter or experience more activity so I can learn more. And yeah, I mean, the more encounter stories that I hear, the less I want to go out there, honestly, especially when people tell me these terrifying encounters where it tried to get them or they saw like this cryptid creature that wasn't a Bigfoot, and it's like, what the heck is going on out there?
Yeah. Yeah, those are interesting stories as well. And it's so interesting how much we don't know. Um, yeah, but I hope it gets recorded and I hope it gets researched more. I think your channel definitely brought a lot of people the courage to speak out in what they saw. And it definitely did for me. You know, I was afraid to tell people what I saw. I was afraid, was I the only one that saw whatever this was? And thanks to your channel and a few others, you know, I like I want to share my story.
Well, I appreciate that, and I also appreciate you for getting in contact with me and sharing your encounter. And I'm sorry about your loss too. I'm sure there's more people in that area that have maybe heard something or seen something strange, especially with that deer feeder being out there. I feel like that is the reason the creature was around. There's people that claim the Sasquatch came up to the deer feeder, and I think it's just like deer, they get used to that timer, and whenever it spits out corn, they'll run up there and get food. And I think the Sasquatch do the same thing. There's been trail cam photos around deer feeders, but I'm not sure if those are real or, somebody in a
Yeah,
suit, but you never know.
I think with the deer feeder too, it was a he made it himself, so it was more of a horse trough kind of um more of a bucket style rather than a spreader too. So he could come up and grab the corn with his hands whenever he wanted to. It wasn't on a timer or anything like that.
No, okay. Yeah, I want to get a deer feeder sometime. I looked them up in the past and they're actually pretty expensive. And to buy corn all the time and keep it maintained, that's a job, but maybe I have a chance. But in the end, I'm just feeding squirrels, birds, and deer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Can you think of anything else that's happened in the past that you think might have been attributed to these creatures or possibly like some type of paranormal activity, whether it's like a shadow person, a UFO, anything you could think of?
Um I don't have any other experiences with the paranormal or anything of that sort. This is a very one-off thing for me, and I also think that's a rarity. I feel like a lot of people in your stories, they see orbs or they see or hear of other creatures, and this is the only unexplained thing that's really happened to me in my life. Um, and it definitely sticks out for that reason.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty interesting how people like myself go out into the forest and have multiple encounters and experiences throughout their life and strange things that occur, and then somebody who goes out to like a cabin for the first time, first couple days they see a Sasquatch and then never see or experience anything else ever again.
Yeah. I I don't know if I wanna see another one again. I from all the stories, it scares me and what I experienced too, even though it didn't really care about me too much. It just kept on walking and we made eye contact. I don't think I would want to see it again.
Yeah, I don't blame you. What do you think these creatures are? Where do you think they came from?
Um, I think they're native to the land and they came before us and the Native Americans, and I think they're very ancient creatures here that know the land. They're very wise. They're very smart from what I hear, and I think I think they're just another creature and similar to the Native Americans that just came here before everyone else, created their social structures before everyone else, and thanks to them being so wise and smart, they've been able to hide off the radar from everyone else.
Yeah, that's a great theory. And there's a lot of cryptid reports from Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, anywhere around the Great Lakes or up north where there's a bunch of ponds and lakes all over the place. And people say that these creatures follow the waterways and they're always found around water. So that could be a reason why there's so many encounters up there. And
Hmm.
what's the terrain like up there? Is there like a lot of conifer trees or a lot of farmland? Can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to. It's super, super dense conifer trees, super dense, deciduous trees that lose their leaves in the wintertime. A lot of ferns on the ground, a lot of sticks, a lot of dead um, tree life on the ground, tree litter on the ground, sticks. Um, the ground was pretty silty, I would say, and sandy. It wasn't super clayey, and um, he definitely wherever he was coming from, it just shocked me because it was super dense, and you couldn't see more than 10 or 20 or 30 feet into the trees. It was just super dense, super. It was almost like you were in a tropical rainforest where we were, and just how dense the vegetation was. Um,
Yeah,
I'm trying to think if there's anything else
that
but
sounds like Bigfoot
that's it.
habitat to me. What time of day did this encounter occur?
That was the other interesting thing. It was around noon. I slept in and everyone left before me, and I'd say 11 to 12 o'clock.
Yeah, that's interesting. I encountered that jet black Sasquatch I was telling you about around 11 a.m.
Hmm.
And what was the weather like that day? Do you remember?
I do. I do. It was perfectly clear, not a cloud in the sky. Um, I would say it was probably, I don't know, it wasn't hot. I remember it was cooler for sure, so probably 85 to 80 degrees. I don't think there was any wind, and it was a beautiful day out.
Yeah, that's interesting. The juvenile and the jet black Sasquatch that I seen, it was I would say around 85 degrees, beautiful day in the summer. The jet black one, the older one that I seen was in June and the juvenile was in July that following month, and yeah, it was a beautiful day during those encounters, and it wasn't too hot, it wasn't cold, and just the weather was perfect. You know, it's just one of those days where the birds are chirping, the sun is shining, and it was a good day to be out in the outdoors.
Yeah, yeah. That was I'm glad you brought up the birds on that. That was the other thing I forgot to mention in my story. When I was hiding on the pontoon boat because I felt like I was being watched, I remember not hearing a single thing in the forest. And usually there's crickets or grasshoppers or acacias in the trees or some sort of birds in the area like loons. But it was dead quiet when I was looking around me on that pontoon boat.
Yeah, and that goes along with the eerie feeling that you had.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, those loons sound really cool, by the way. It's almost like listening to elk in the mountains.
They are very cool. They're eerie though too. They're spooky in of themselves sometimes if you hear them late at night.
Yeah, absolutely. And they got those red little beady eyes. They're creepy.
Yeah, they're a cool bird though. Very pretty.
Yeah, absolutely. It's cool watching them, like listening to them vocalize, and whenever they dip underneath the water and come out somewhere else, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, they're very, very cool birds.
Yeah. Have you ever looked online to see if there's ever been any encounter sightings in this area?
I haven't. The one thing that was interesting to me is I spent probably, I don't know, 20 or 30 hours in the last week following up to this investigation of yours, trying to find the house and the log cabin where we stayed. And I remember looking it up 5 years ago and being able to find it, but all of a sudden, there's no pictures of the cabin. There's no ads for the place. There's no ads in any of the listing VRBOs, Airbnbs. It's totally gone off the grid where this place has. And I've looked as hard as I could, try to call people, try to call the relatives that stayed there to see if they remembered anything. And with all those leads, I couldn't find an address or in a location or even the lake where it was at.
Yeah, that is interesting. And if you don't mind me asking, what county was this in Wisconsin?
What county?
Yeah. Do you remember?
I don't. I'm sorry. I should know that. But it was a little outside of Hayward, a little, I would say an hour to 2 hours north. I was so young at the time, so I don't remember quite the area in terms of county wise where we were at.
Okay, that's no problem. I think Hayward is in Sawyer County. And if you go to squatchable.com, you can put in the state and the county and look up the Bigfoot reports. I'm actually on there right now. And yeah, there's a few encounter stories from that county, but you'll just have to figure out exactly where it was at. Go on squatchable.com. And like I said, look
Cool,
up the state and county, and you'll see all the reports. And I think it pulls them off the BFRO website.
cool. I'll make sure to do that. That sounds like a great opportunity to learn more about my encounter.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think that pretty well covers your encounter. And I do appreciate you for contacting me and sharing this experience openly here on Sasquatch Theory.
Perfect. I appreciate you having me and letting me speak about my encounter. I would definitely like to learn more and hear what the people say about it because, to be frank with you, I don't know what happened. So I appreciate you giving me the time of day and telling my story.
Yeah, absolutely. It's no problem. And you did an excellent job. And I hope that speaking with me here on the channel openly helped you out a little bit. And yeah,
Perfect.
you
Yes,
did.
it did. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you did an excellent job. I appreciate you. And if you ever encounter or experience anything else, feel free to reach back out to me, man.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
All right. Take care, Jonathan.
Yep. Bye.
Bye. All right, Jonathan, I really appreciate you for sharing your Bigfoot encounter from Wisconsin with me openly here on the channel. And it was cool to hear about an encounter at an Airbnb cabin because a lot of times people think you have to be extremely remote out there in the woods and you have to camp out there for days. And sometimes these creatures are a lot closer than one might think. The Ozark Carryman and myself started renting out Airbnb cabins recently, and it seems to be working a lot better than setting up a tent out in the middle of the woods because that takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of resources. So we started renting out these cabins in Bigfoot areas, and it gives us more time to go out there and explore the forest. And whenever we get back, it just makes things easier and it frees up a lot more time to do actual Bigfoot research. But yeah, I appreciate everyone for listening today and for everyone's support. Thank you, and be safe out in the forest. Take care.